I'm here because I believe in justice for the Palestinian people whose land have been occupied. In the whole area is treated like a prison, like it belongs to the Israeli state, which it doesn't.
Okay, so I've come to the demonstration today to show my solidarity and to show how interested I am in the quiet peace in Gaza. It was an inspiration what happened last week in Gaza with them breaking through the blockade in Egypt, and I just think it shows the strength of people as they act collectively, what they can do in the face of extreme prejudice, what they can do in the face of extreme hate.
I've come here today basically because situation just because they want to go out there, we've had to stand there 9 hours, 10 hours on the border, and we weren't allowed to even have a glass of water. We weren't even allowed to visit the shops. We've been through this suffering, yet we were the British citizens. What do we say about these people in Gaza who basically don't have any food, who don't have water, clean water? I've just come back from Bangladesh and asked me...
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine! Long live Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Long live Palestine!
80% of the people who live on the Gaza Strip live below the poverty line. That's the poverty levels of Gaza. And onto that, we have had the Israeli siege. Now, when we think about the Israeli siege, sometimes we might just think about this as being an event from last June. But the reality is that the people of the Gaza have actually been under Israeli siege since 1967, when Israeli troops moved into the Gaza and expelled the Egyptian forces. They've been there since 1967, and they have continued the oppression of the Palestinian people up until that point. The oppression has got more significant. First of all, in 2001, when the Second Intifada was launched. At that point, they cut Gaza off, and they started to build the apartheid wall around 3 sides of the Gaza. The 4th side is taken by the Mediterranean. They started to cut the people of Gaza off from the rest of Palestine, from Israel, and from Egypt itself. And those are the horrors of what the people of the Gaza have to put up with. Now, people have talked about that already this morning, and I don't want to spend too much time talking about that aspect of it. But what I think is also happening in Gaza is the heartening side of what's going on there. Now, how can you talk about something being inspiring and happening when you find that in the last year 40 people in Gaza have died for lack of basic medical facilities? 40 people have died because they can't get access to hospital. 80% of the population live below the poverty line. Where is the heartening aspect in that? Well, actually, the heartening aspect is that despite that level of oppression, the people of Gaza have continued to fight against the Israeli authorities. Actually, in 2005, the last Israeli settlers in the Gaza were expelled by the people of Gaza because they refused to put up with Israeli occupiers coming and sitting and stealing their land. And recently, in the height of the most dreadful circumstances of the last 6 months, who could not have been inspired by the picture of those bulldozers knocking down that apartheid wall and seeing those Palestinian people walking into Egypt for the first time in all those years, celebrating their power and actually saying it doesn't matter what the Israelis do, we will continue to struggle, we will continue to fight, and we will continue to raise our banner of human rights. And that's one of the most inspiring things about what has happened in the last few months. And then there's one final thing that I would also like to add. That inspiration, knocking down the wall, going into Egypt, and yet the Egyptian government has also now started to push the Palestinians back into Gaza, and the Egyptian government has started to say that they will start to rebuild the wall and isolate people in Gaza. And therefore it raises a very important question. Who can be the liberator of the people of Palestine? For too long we have looked to the leaders of the Middle East, and actually the leaders of Egypt have sided up with the Americans and the Israelis and the oppression of the Palestinian people. If we want to look at hope in Palestine, it doesn't come from Mubarak and the Egyptian leaders. It certainly doesn't come from the leaders in Israel. It doesn't come from the liberators of Bush and now Tony Blair, who now calls himself the peace envoy of the Middle East. The real hope for liberation comes from the Palestinian people themselves, who continue to fight for their rights, their freedom and their justice. So what does that mean that we do? Obviously we have to support that. We have to raise the banner of support for the Palestinian people. We have to talk about the tragedies and the oppression that the Palestinian people face. But there's one final thing. You see, the Israeli government is back to the hilt by the Americans and by the British. and of course we're in Britain. And that means that we have a responsibility to raise questions about what our government is doing. And there's an old slogan now from the anti-war movement. At the start, when they were going into Iraq, we said, they do not do this in my name. They're not going to war in my name. Well, we also have to say the same about Palestine. They cozy up to the Israelis, they turn a blind eye to the Israelis' war in the Lebanon, they turn a blind eye to the continuing oppression of the Palestinian people, and we have to say the British government does not do this in my name. We stand shoulder to shoulder with the Palestinian people, and one day, those British governments which continue to support the Israeli cause, they will pay the political price when they're swept from power.
Thank you, Michael.